Alright, hey guys, I'm going to walk you through doing the PWP mask. And the way I like to start is by first marking the 1/2 inch seam allowance with a post-it note. So I have the piece of paper lined up to the 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'll also take my seam gauge, and it needs to be marked at an inch and a half. I'm going to line up the point of that with where the needle will hit so that I'll know how long to make that first set of stitches, and that'll make sense in just a second. So I've marked these 2 lines that are an inch and a half long, and for that first step I'm going to fold it in half. I don't even need to pin it, but I'll line up the edge of the fabric with the seam allowance and that mark, and I'll also use this finger and kind of point where the inch and a half distance is. I'll go ahead and start sewing. Back tack. When I get to about this area here where my finger marked that inch and a half, I'll know that that's where I need to stop and start again, the back tack. And instead of just lifting up the fabric and cutting it, I'm just gonna pull it through. And because this is, again, inch and a half, the edge of this fabric needs to line up here. I'll drop the needle in, and that'll be an inch and a half line that you can stitch. And again, this is gonna be doing the chain stitch, so I'm not pulling out that fabric, I'm not cutting any threads just yet. I'm gonna go ahead and do a long chain of these. Times 3, times 10, however long you want to have in the chain. And I'll do one more. So you'll continue this on until you have a long chain like this, and you'll take it to the ironing table, and you'll go ahead and snip off all of these threads at once. So one way you can do it is, I guess you just like fold it in half, and this way you can kind of cut 2 at a time like that, or 1 at a time, whichever. And then this, when you get to this area, I like to hold these 2 threads so that I already have a grasp of the one on the other side, and I don't have to turn it around and fish for it. So here's another example. And you'll do that across the 5 or 10, however many are in your chain. And you'll end up with pieces like this. And I like to open this up by putting my hands and middle finger in through the sides and through that filter pocket, and I kind of tug out to make sure that the stitch is going to hold. There's going to be a lot of stress on that seam when people put a filter in and out. I'll go ahead and press just like in that original YouTube video. And I'll do this again across 10 masks. I'll do it assembly line style. That's some of that there. And eventually I'll have a nice stack like this, and it'll be ready to have elastic in it. And I tend to include putting this bottom crease in the iron because it already serves as a nice groove for putting the elastic right in there. It'll line up really nicely. And I also found that it was a lot easier to hold the fabric and the elastic this way. Just, I don't know, it's just easier for me to insert. And for this, the elastic is cut at 8 inches long, and I'm just pinning all this in. See how that elastic side fits really nicely into this pressed fold. Okay, and you'll do that again times 10, and we'll come back to the sewing table where I have some prepped already, and this step is no different from the others before, where we're gonna just sew all of the seams on the right side of the mask in a long chain of 10, and I'll demonstrate that today. You definitely want to back tack a few times over the elastic, because the last thing we want is for the elastic to snap off when someone gets it or wears it. Back tack over this seam. And again, I'm going to do a long chain of these. Okay, and you'll just continue that again times 10 or however long your chain is. And I'll have a bunch of those ready over here. You'll snip the threads like you did in that first chain, and you'll just start turning these right side out. And I like to make a stack of them to where the filter pocket is on the top. And that'll make sense in a second. So I'm gonna continue turning these right side out with the filter pocket on the top, but on the underneath of the mask. So let's see. So again, filter pocket is on the top, but underneath I'll have a huge stack of these guys, and I'll show you the pin pleat press step. So once I have all of these masks here, I like to start off with the fabric being nice and flat and pressed. And I'll go just a little bit below where that filter pocket seam is. So I'm not even looking, I'm just feeling for it. And I'll start the first pleat down. And then I'll go ahead and pin it. See, that's where the pocket is. And then I'll do that 2 more times for a total of 3 pleats going down. Feels like there's a pretty big distance here, and it's okay. On the next one, I'll try to start my pleats a little bit higher. So once I have all my 3 pleats pinned, I'll go ahead and press on the reverse, just so I don't melt the ball heads, or like the pin heads here. And I'll continue these across the stack of 10, make a little pile of these, and then I'll be ready to take it to top stitching. So let's see. When I'm building and working on the insides of the mask, because I have this huge spool of green thread, that's just what I'm using for the inside. But when you get to the top stitching part, please use a contrasting stitch. That way people can tell which side is the one with the filter and which is the side that needs to be more and facing out towards other people. So I'm going to go ahead and thread this red top stitching thread, and I just have a green on the bobbin. And it might differ on your machine, but for mine I found that I have to move my tension to about a 9 to be able to do the top stitching smoothly. And here I can even increase my stitch length to be longer. That'll help the process go a little bit faster too. So I like to first start with the pleats going down this way, just so that it feeds pretty easily into the machine. Back tack at the start and the end of each mask. And again, do the chain. And I have an example of more of these here. So you can see that the top stitch is red, underside is green, and this has only had one round of top stitching, but see how it makes this really nice ladder that's easy to go back through into the machine. So now I'm gonna do the second round of top stitching. I'll still keep the same reds up for the second round also. Continue the chain. It should be easy because you're just following along a stitch that you've already made. It goes by so much faster. And if you want to just pretend that these are done and you're ready to do the final snip, one way that I found is pretty simple is, let's see, where are my scissors? I'll use these. Is I'll cut these, I can cut these 2 at a time. So sometimes I like to go right at the top and bottom of each mask and snip the threads as close as I can. But this way, you know, you're doing it as much of an assembly line as you can instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4 on each mask. You can do it in half the steps and half the movement. So I'm going to continue this and I'll have my chain of masks ready to turn in. And that's it.